Now, The Changeling tells the story of John Russell, a composer who relocates to a secluded mansion following the tragic death of his wife and child. As he settles into his new home, he begins to experience strange occurrences that lead him to discover the mansion's dark history, involving a young boy named Joseph who met a tragic fate. The film masterfully weaves together elements of psychological and supernatural horror, creating an atmosphere of pervasive dread that captivates viewers from start to finish. In this episode, we'll also examine the film's exploration of themes such as grief and loss as John Russell grapples with his past while facing the malevolent forces tied to the house. The Changeling serves as a poignant reminder that the past can haunt us in more ways than one. Additionally, we'll discuss the societal implications of the film, particularly regarding how it reflects our fears about the unknown and the importance of confronting buried secrets. So horror aficionados, prepare yourself for an in-depth analysis of The Changeling, a film that not only haunts, but also compels us to reflect on the shadows of our own past. Whether you're a longtime fan of this chilling classic or new to the world of supernatural horror, there's something here for everyone. So let's dive into the ghostly whispers of The Changeling. Alright, so the movie we are reviewing today is The Changeling. This chilling tale follows John Russell, played by the legendary George C. Scott, as a composer grappling with grief after the tragic loss of his wife and daughter. Seeking solace and a fresh start, he relocates to an old mansion in Seattle, unaware that he's stepping into a nightmare. Almost immediately, John finds himself haunted by a restless spirit and unsettling secrets tied to the house's dark past. As he unravels the mystery, he becomes embroiled in a web of eerie revelations that refuse to stay buried, revealing a tragic story of loss and revenge. In a nutshell, this isn't your standard jump scare fest. The Changeling leans heavily into psychological horror, building tension through atmosphere, mood, and deeply personal stakes. It's a ghost story, but one that's layered with a haunting tale of buried secrets and the lengths to which a soul will go to seek justice. The Changeling has a plot that is simple yet powerful. One of the greatest strengths is how tightly it keeps its narrative focused on John's journey. Every element in the story, from the strange noises echoing through the mansion to the eerie visions that invade his thoughts, serves to unravel the dark history of the house and the restless spirit it harbors. The pacing is almost methodical, guiding us through a series of unsettling revelations that build dread without ever feeling rushed. Rather than relying on over-the-top scares, the film masterfully utilizes atmosphere and tension to create a pervasive sense of unease that lingers with us. And what sets the film apart in the horror genre is its restraint. Unlike many ghost stories that might overwhelm viewers with an abundance of supernatural effects, The Changeling prioritizes psychological horror, immersing us in John's perspective as he pieces together the clues hidden within the mansion's walls. This slow burn approach pays off in haunting revelations that resonate both on a personal and a supernatural level. As the narrative unfolds, viewers are left with a profound sense of dread that comes not just from the fear of the unknown, but from the very real and relatable themes of loss, sorrow, and the haunting memories that shape our lives. And the film's meticulous storytelling is complemented by Scott's powerful performance, which grounds the supernatural elements in a deeply human experience. His portrayal of a grieving father not only elevates the horror, but also invites empathy, making us feel his despair and driving the film's emotional weight. Overall, The Changeling truly succeeds in crafting a story that's both chilling and poignant, firmly establishing itself as a classic in the realm of horror cinema. So let's take a look at the performances, starting with the aforementioned George C. Scott as John Russell. Scott brings an exceptional gravitas to the role, infusing his character with a raw, grounded energy rarely seen in horror films. His portrayal taps into a deeply relatable vulnerability, capturing John's profound sorrow and resilience as he faces an unknown supernatural threat. Scott's performance anchors the film, making John's transition from grief-stricken widower to determined investigator feel genuine and urgent. The role shows Scott's nuanced range, moving from quiet despair to steely resolve as he becomes determined to uncover the secrets that are lurking within his new home. His understated intensity makes John a sympathetic figure, following or allowing the audience to connect with his pain, his courage, and his need for closure. The supporting cast enhances the story, adding layers that deepen the film's emotional resonance. Trish Vanderveer portrays Claire Norman, a sympathetic and compassionate local who becomes John's confidant and partner in his investigation. Vanderveer brings a warmth and curiosity to her role, adding a touch of levity and grounding to the darker aspects of the story. And her chemistry with Scott is subtle, but it's evident, building an effective partnership that underscores John's isolation and the gravity of his quest. While the supporting characters are not as deeply explored as John, this selective development serves to maintain the narrative's laser focus on John's journey. The Changeling is ultimately a story about one man's confrontation with grief and his courage in uncovering the unsettling truths that are haunting him. This singular focus allows Scott's powerful performance to really shine and amplify the film's themes of loss, revenge, and redemption. The restrained character development of the ensemble cast enhances the film's eerie atmosphere, leaving the audience firmly tethered to John and his harrowing experience without diluting the emotional impact. Now, The Changeling is rich in themes that go beyond the surface-level scares of a ghost story. It explores profound concepts like grief, justice, and the enduring presence of past traumas. At its heart, John's grief is a connecting force, both grounding him in his personal loss and creating an almost spiritual link with the ghosts inhabiting his mansion in the present. His own unresolved pain allows him to emphasize with the spirit's torment, establishing a unique relationship where he feels compelled to pursue justice for the restless presence. This shared experience of loss and injustice brings depth to the story, highlighting the way grief can transcend even the boundaries between life and death. Justice is another critical theme, as John's quest to uncover the truth mirrors a pursuit to bring closure to a soul-denied peace. In seeking answers, he isn't just appeasing a supernatural entity. He's wrestling with the ethical and moral responsibility of facing uncomfortable truths. His journey becomes less about survival and more about redemption, both for himself and for the forgotten victim whose story remains silenced. In this way, the Changeling suggests that some truths, however painful, will refuse to stay buried until they are acknowledged and addressed. Symbolically, the mansion itself is more than just a spooky backdrop. It's a metaphor for repressed trauma and hidden sins. Its darkened hallways, abandoned rooms, and antique furnishings feel like they're a physical manifestation of the secrets that lurk within. One of the most iconic symbols in the film is the antique wheelchair, an object tied directly to the ghost's identity and a chilling reminder of a life cut short and justice denied. The wheelchair appears almost as a harbinger, rolling ominously through the house, a visual representation of the anger, the sadness, and the need for resolution that the spirit carries. In this way, the Changeling suggests that the past, especially when marked by tragedy, can become a living, haunting force, demanding acknowledgement until it's finally put to rest. The Changeling owes much of its enduring impact to its masterful cinematography. Peter Medak's direction, in collaboration with cinematographer John Coquillin, uses a blend of wide shots, dim lighting, and meticulously framed compositions to create a space that feels both hauntingly beautiful and terrifyingly vast. The mansion is shot in a way that makes it appear almost alive, its creaking floors and darkened corners filled with hidden menace. Coquillin's careful manipulation of light and shadow creates an oppressive atmosphere where even empty rooms feel charged with anticipation. This approach allows the horror to seep into each frame, as if the house itself is aware of John's presence and is silently observing his every move. A standout visual moment in the film is the iconic scene where the red ball bouncing down the staircase. This simple, understated action is a perfect example of how the Changeling uses minimal effects to maximum impact. Rather than relying on loud shocks, the quiet, almost deliberate movement of the ball unsettles the audience, tapping into a more primal fear of the unknown. It's the type of scare that lingers because it's grounded in a disturbing subtlety, forcing us to confront the uncanny nature of an otherwise innocuous object, transformed by context. This scene, and others like it, demonstrates Medak's understanding of psychological horror, proving that sometimes what we don't see or don't understand is scarier than anything overtly terrifying. Sound design is pivotal to the Changeling's eerie atmosphere. Every auditory choice seems crafted to deepen the sense of dread, from the soft echo of footsteps down empty hallways to faint, ghostly whispers that fade just as they become recognizable. Each sound is more than background noise. It's part of the storytelling that signals the presence of something unseen but palpable. These carefully layered sounds keep us on edge, pulling us further into the psychological horror as we become attuned to the film's uncanny environment. And then there's the music. Rick Wilkins' score, his compositions are a blend of piano and orchestral elements that convey both John's grief and the tension of the supernatural elements. It's not just background music, it's a voice in itself. It echoes the sorrow and suspense at the heart of the story. Wilkins uses minimalist melodies that allow for the house's ambient noises to fill the gaps, creating a dissonance that leaves us feeling vulnerable. This restraint, letting silence and ambient sound speak as much as the music, makes for an immersive experience where every creak and whisper has weight. And those sound effects too are artfully understated. The groaning of old doors, subtle thuds, and other noises make the house itself seem alive, a character haunted by its own secrets. This focus on ambient sound heightens the supernatural presence without relying on visual cues or heavy-handed effects, proving that sometimes the scariest things aren't what we think we hear but can't quite see. The Changeling embraces a deliberately slow pace, creating a tension that builds gradually rather than relying on constant scares. The film's pacing allows it to breathe, giving us time to explore the subtleties of John's story, his grief, and the dark mystery he's drawn into. Each scene feels purposeful, adding a piece to the puzzle while building an atmosphere that steadily tightens the sense of dread. The editing mirrors this approach, focusing on letting moments linger just enough to keep us on edge, as though something might emerge from the shadows at any second. There are moments of silence and stillness where nothing obvious happens, but the unease grows. For more modern viewers used to quicker pacing, The Changeling will feel like a very, very slow burn. But it is precisely this restraint that gives the film its power. The editing allows suspense to build naturally, and by not rushing through key moments, the film makes each revelation feel earned and each scare hit just that much harder. This patient pacing also grounds the horror in John's experience, making his journey feel personal and relatable. His interactions with the haunting aren't treated like mere plot points. They're part of his grieving process, and we feel his emotions as he moves from curiosity to determination. So The Changeling is as much about John's inner conflict as it is about the supernatural, and the pacing respects this, allowing the story's psychological depth to shine through. And by the time the film reaches its climax, the stakes feel intensely real, and the slow, deliberate approach has heightened the horror to a level few fast-paced horror films can actually match. The Changeling is a masterclass in restrained, atmospheric horror that places psychological unease over graphic violence. This isn't a film that relies on cheap jump scares or gore to shock the viewer. Instead, it cultivates a slow, creeping dread that takes root and lingers long after the film is over. You'll keep thinking about it. The horror is rooted in subtleties. The unsettling creak of a door, the eerie quiet of an empty room, or a chilling sight like the red ball bouncing down the staircase. It's these seemingly mundane moments that The Changeling weaponizes to keep viewers on edge, constantly expecting something dreadful without knowing exactly what or when it will come. Unlike most modern horror films, which often amp up the blood and special effects, The Changeling draws its power from what remains unseen. By leaving much to the imagination, it taps into a primal fear of the unknown. The supernatural elements are hinted at rather than directly shown, and the film leans on mood and sound and visual cues to create its unsettling atmosphere. This approach keeps the viewer in a heightened state of suspense, making the scares more deeply psychological than visceral. The lack of gore and minimal on-screen violence also work to the film's advantage, inviting us to focus on the emotional weight of the story rather than the graphic imagery. The horror is centered around a sense of wrongness, something deeply unsettling that defies logical explanation, making it feel real and immediate. This psychological angle allows The Changeling to resonate on a very personal level. Instead of shocking the senses, it burrows into the mind, lingers in the subconscious, and leaves us questioning, what would I do in John's position? It's proof that sometimes the scariest films are those that show us the least, but make us feel the most. So as we wrap it all up, The Changeling is a testament to how horror doesn't always need gore or explosive scares to be effective. The atmospheric classic excels by layering psychological dread, emotion, and suspense, crafting a film that taps into primal fears and deeper themes of grief and injustice. It's the type of horror movie that subtly works its way under your skin, leaving a lingering sense of unease that will stay with you long after the film ends. The incredible performances by George C. Scott, the carefully orchestrated cinematography, and the haunting score all work in harmony to make The Changeling an unforgettable experience. For me, I give The Changeling a solid 8 out of 10. While it may not hit every modern horror expectation, it's an incredibly effective film that shows the lasting power of subtle, story-driven scares. This is a film for anyone who loves a ghost story with depth, mood, and that classic chill factor. It's also a great film to use as an entry into horror. You don't think you like it? Try this one. It just might be your speed. So did The Changeling manage to creep you out as much as it did me? Or maybe it's already earned a place among your horror favorites. I love to hear what you thought about the film, the scares, or even some scenes that stuck with you. Drop me a message with your thoughts, and don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review the podcast wherever you listen. It really helps us bring more horror fans into the Real Talk community. Now, next time, Real Talk Horror Edition, we're going to dive into a completely different kind of horror, Terrifier. A brutal, blood-soaked slasher that has taken on a life of its own in the cult horror scene. We'll be talking about the gore, the scares, and of course Art the Clown, so make sure you're ready for a wild ride. And as always, stay connected with us on Instagram and Threads at Real Talk, or send us your feedback anytime at therealtalk@gmail.com. Until then, keep it spooky and stay scared.